The cloud broke for maybe 40 seconds, friends, on the 31st day of the biggest search in American history. And I was the only living soul positioned to see down through the hole it made. And what I saw at the bottom of that hole, I reported twice to the government of the United States. And both reports have ceased to exist. And I have carried it alone for 54 years. And I am 88 years old now. And my doctor talks to my daughter in the hallway in a voice they think I cannot hear. So tonight, friends, while the voice in this chest is still my own, I am going to file that report a third and final time with you. There is a valley in the mountains of south-central Alaska that is on no chart I ever flew with, and I flew those mountains for 40 years. In that valley, there is a lake the color of green bottle glass, a mile of it, dead calm in country where nothing is ever calm. And on the south shore of that lake, friends, drawn up in a line on the gravel the way float planes are drawn up at a dock, noses to the water, wingtip to wingtip, neat as a military review, I counted, in 40 seconds, before the cloud healed itself under me. Upwards of 30 airplanes, friends, in a valley with no road, no strip, no cabin, no smoke, no human soul, and not wrecks. Hear me now. I had seen wrecks by the dozen by that day. I could read a crash site like you read a headline. These were whole, wings level, props straight, glass catching the light. Old ones, friends, fabric biplanes out of the 20s, a Ford Trimotor, I would stake my ticket on it, and new ones, a Beaver, a 180, machines I might have gassed at Merrill Field that same year. All of them parked, friends, parked and kept, the way things are kept that somebody intends to keep. And at the end of that line, nearest the water, there was a gap, an empty place on the gravel, the next place in the row, and I have had 54 years to measure that gap in my head against the one airplane the whole world was looking for that October. A twin-engine Cessna 310 with 4 men aboard. And friends, it fit. The empty place fit. And then the cloud closed under my wings like a lid, going onto a pot. And I was alone, at 9,000 feet, over an unbroken white floor, in a country that had just shown me its collection, and the gap in it. Friends, the gap it was holding open, patient as gravity, for the next one. Before I take you back to October of 1972, do one thing for an old pilot. Put in the comments where you are tonight, your town, your state, and whether you have ever looked down on your own country from a small airplane and understood suddenly how little of it we have actually walked. I read every one of them. That understanding is the door this whole account comes through. My name is Orrin Sivertson. I was born in Petersburg, Alaska, in 1938, fishboat people, and I soloed an airplane before I drove a car, which in Alaska in those years was not unusual, friends. It was practically the school system. You have to understand what the airplane is up there, because it is not what it is to you. Alaska in 1972 had one paved road system, huddled around 2 cities, and a landmass that would stretch from Georgia to California. And everything else, every village, every mine, every trapline, every sick child, and every mail sack, and every quart of milk, moved by air or did not move. We had more airplanes per family than the rest of the country had per county. The bush pilot was not a daredevil. Friends, forget the movies. He was the school bus, the ambulance, the hearse, and the church van. And I was one of them from age 19, hauling freight and hunters and grief up and down the ranges, in Cessnas and Beavers. And by 34, I knew my piece of that country the way you know the hallway to your own bathroom in the dark. I tell you all this, so you will weigh what comes next correctly, friends. We were not superstitious men. Superstition is a luxury of people whose mistakes cost them embarrassment. Our mistakes cost us the airplane, and the winter took the rest. And so, we were the most brutally practical tribe of men I have ever run with. And it is exactly those men, friends, the least superstitious men in America, who taught me, quietly, matter-of-factly, the way you would teach a boy which ice is rotten, that there was one square of the mountains you flew around, not through, around. And then came October of 1972, and the event that history remembers, and I want to lay the true and public facts of it down plainly, because my account lives in the margins of those facts, friends, and you should know which parts you can verify tonight from your own chair. On the 16th of October, 1972, a chartered twin-engine Cessna 310 took off from Anchorage bound for Juneau, carrying 4 men, and among them 2 sitting members of the United States Congress. One of them, the majority leader of the House of Representatives, friends, the second most powerful man in that body, on his way to a campaign stop. The airplane never arrived. No mayday, no wreckage, no signal, nothing. And what followed, and this is the public record, was the largest search and rescue operation in the history of this country, then or, by some measures, since. 39 days, friends. Military, Coast Guard, Civil Air Patrol, and us, the bush pilots. Dozens of us flying volunteer grids dawn to dark. Better than 3,000 sorties over 325,000 square miles, an area the size of 2 Californias, gridded off on the wall of a hangar at Elmendorf into lettered and numbered squares, friends, and flown, square by square, day after day, in the worst flying weather God sends. And at the end of 39 days, the United States of America, with all its satellites and its bombers and its money, called it, and went home, having found, friends, and I want this heard, having found not one rivet, not a seat cushion, not an oil slick, 4 men and 5,000 pounds of airplane, gone into the country like a stone into deep water, and to this day, 54 years on, no piece of that Cessna has ever been seen again. That is the official mystery, friends, and it is real, and it broke hearts, and it changed federal law, and I flew in it, 12 hours a day, for 5 weeks. But this account is not about the airplane they never found. It is about the square where I stopped looking, friends. Because on the hangar wall at Elmendorf, in that great grid of the search, there was a square the old men flew around, and its number, on the wall, in grease pencil, was Lima 9. Let me teach you how a grid search works, friends, because the discipline of it is the skeleton of this account, and because you need to feel the size. A wall of the hangar at Elmendorf carried the master chart, the whole south half of the state ruled into squares, each square 30 miles on a side, lettered down and numbered across, and every morning at 5, the operations officers assigned squares to crews the way a foreman deals out rows of a field. You flew your square in strips, friends, back and forth, a mile apart, eyes down, 2 sets of eyes to an airplane. If the airplane had 2 seats, 4 hours out, land, gas, fly it again crosswise. It is the most boring work a pilot can do, and the most sacred. Friends, both at once, because the arithmetic of October in Alaska says that a man alive on day 3 is a man found on day 3, and after day 7 you are flying for the families, and after day 20 you are flying for the record, and you fly anyway. Friends, every crew flies anyway, because the whole religion of the bush is a 2-line creed. You go look. You do not stop looking. That religion is why what I have to tell you about Lima 9 sat so crooked in me, friends, from the first morning I heard it said out loud. I drew squares all that October, like every other man with a ticket and a machine. And on the 9th morning, at the coffee urn under the master chart, I traced my day's assignment with a finger, Kilo 8, and my finger crossed its neighbor on the way, and Askelbrun's hand came down on my wrist. Axbrun, friends, I need you to see him. Norwegian out of Homer by way of 3 wars worth of flying, 60-some years old that fall, 20,000 hours. A man who had force-landed on glaciers and river bars, and one time, famously, on the roof of a cannery. A man other pilots went quiet around the way infielders go quiet around an old pitcher. He did not talk much, and he did not touch people, friends. And he had my wrist in a fisherman's grip, and he looked at my finger where it sat on the chart, on the square beside my square, and he said, "Lo, just for the 2 of us, you are in Kilo 8 tomorrow. Fine square, Kilo 8. And if your strips take you to the east edge of it, son, you turn at the edge." And I said, "That is the procedure, Axe. We turn at the edge." And he said, "No." Listen to what I am saying to you, friends. He tightened that grip 1 notch, and he said, "Other squares. A man drifts a mile over the line. Nobody writes him up. We are looking for a lost airplane, not surveying. That square," he pointed with his chin, not his hand, friends, his chin, "at Lima 9, that square. You turn at the edge. You can look into it from the edge all day. Plenty of men have looked into it from the edge. You do not take your shadow inside the line." And I laughed, friends, because I was 34 and he was old. And I said, "What is in it, Axe?" And Askelbrun looked at me for about the length of a slow breath, and said the sentence every account I have ever heard of that square eventually arrives at. Said it the way you would report the fuel on board, no color in it at all. "Nothing is in it, son. It is not an empty square. It is an occupied one." And he took his coffee and walked out to his airplane, friends, and flew 11 hours that day, looking for 4 strangers, because the creed says you go look. And I stood under the chart a while, and I noticed then what I could never after unnotice. The grease pencil strips on every square around Lima 9, dense as window screen, day after day of coverage. And on Lima 9, friends, in the heart of the biggest search in American history, 3 thin strips, all 3 along the western edge, all 3 flown when I checked the sortie log. And I did check, friends, that evening, quietly, by men over 55. You will want to know, as I wanted to know, what the young and the reckless found when they broke the custom, friends. Because in a fraternity of hundreds, there is always one. And we had ours. And his name was Cub Wallen. And he earned his account 4 years before all this, in 1968. And it was Axe himself, of all people, who told it to me, 3 nights after the coffee urn, in the corner of a pilot's bar on Merrill Field, because he had seen my face at the chart and judged correctly, friends, that half a warning is worse than none. Cub Wallen was 26 in '68, a fine stick, ferrying a Super Cub from Talkeetna toward Cordova on a Bluebird day. And rather than go around the long way like his elders, he drew his pencil line straight, friends, straight through the middle of the square that had no name yet, at any hangar he had drunk in, and he flew it. And nothing happened, friends. Hear that plainly. No lights, no voices, no missing time. The engine never coughed. 40 minutes of mountains and 1 long green valley with a lake, and out the other side, and he landed at Cordova, and gassed and went on with his week. Except, friends, Axe was at Cordova that afternoon, and he watched Cub Wallen taxi in, and he told me, in that bar, with his beer going flat untouched, which I never saw before or since, He told me. The boy shut down, and he sat in the airplane. Friends. 10 minutes? 15. Line boy standing there with the hose, waiting. And when Cub climbed down at last, he was white. Friends, not scared white, Axe said. That is the thing, not scared. White like a man doing arithmetic. He keeps getting the same answer to. And Axe walked over and said, You came through the middle, didn't you? And Cub Wallen looked at him and said the only thing he is on record as ever saying about it. It's a nice valley, Axe. There's a lake. And the damnedest thing, it fits me. And Axe said, What fits you, son? And Cub said, The space. And would not say another word. Friends. Not that day, not ever. And 5 weeks later, in fair weather, on a routine hop he had flown 100 times, in a different part of the state entirely, Cub Wallen and his Super Cub went missing. And here, friends, is where his account stops being a bar story and becomes a federal document I have personally read. They found the airplane the following June, 200 miles from his route, friends, in a hanging valley with no name, sitting on a gravel bar, and I want the next words heard exactly. Not crashed on it, sitting on it. Gear down, flaps set, switches off, parked. Friends, parked neat as Sunday, in a valley whose gravel, when the recovery crew studied it, showed no landing roll. No tracks, friends. Not the airplanes, not the boys. An aircraft in perfect order, set down in the middle of roadless Alaska like a toy put back on a shelf, and of Cub Wallen himself. Then or ever, no trace at all. The board wrote it up as a forced landing with the pilot lost, attempting to walk out, friends, because the board has boxes, and every account must go in a box. But every pilot on the recovery, and Axe was one, saw the gravel. You cannot land a Super Cub on gravel and leave no roll, friends. That airplane was not landed there. It was returned there. Incomplete, friends. Like a keeper culling his collection. And the empty seat is the part Axe could not drink away. And now, at 88, neither can I. It took the machine, and it took the boy, friends, and it gave back only the machine. And I have come to believe, God help me, that we were shown the difference between what it collects and what it keeps. Day 31 of the search was the 14th of November. Friends, and I want you to have the shape of a search that is dying, because it is a particular grief. The military was drawing down, the newsmen had gone home to their elections, the weather had gone from bad to Alaskan, and the grid on the hangar wall was a checkerboard of despair. Every square flown 4, 5, 6 times, every square but one. And the families still came to the hangar. Friends, every morning, 2 wives in good wool coats standing out of the way by the coffee, thanking us, thanking every crew, every morning, for 31 mornings. And if you want to know what moves a practical man to do a thing the old ones told him not to do, it is not courage, friends, and it is not curiosity. It is 2 women in wool coats saying thank you for looking, while behind them, on the wall, hangs a square with 3 thin strips on its western edge. If this is your first night at this lamp, I will bank the fire for 1 minute only. This channel is an old man, and the reports that never got filed, told plain and level. No music, no dressed-up nonsense. If that is worth your evening, subscribe, so the next account finds you. And when you finish tonight, find your town on a map. Friends, a real map. Paper if you still own one. And look, just once, at the nearest empty square, the one with no roads in it. Every state has them. You will look at yours differently by the end of this account. I promise you that. My assignment that day was Mike 10, southeast of the bad square. and the weather was a solid overcast at about 7,000, tops around 9, a white lid on the world, friends, with the peaks sticking up through it here and there like teeth through a sheet. And I flew my strips over the cloud floor with a hired observer, half asleep beside me, looking for a hole, because under that lid nobody was seeing anything anyway. And at 2 in the afternoon, with the light already going long the way it does up there in November, my fuel arithmetic said, turn for home. And home was Merrill, northwest, and the straight line home. Friends, you are already there ahead of me. The straight line home ran corner to corner through Lima Nine, and the long way around added 40 minutes I did not have to a fuel margin I did not love. And I sat there, at 9,000 feet, doing the oldest math in aviation, the math that fills half the graves in that state. And I will not dress it up, friends. I was tired. I was heartsick. The square was under cloud anyway, sealed. A white floor wall to wall. What was there to see or be seen by? And Axe's voice said, turn at the edge. And 2 women in wool coats said, thank you for looking. And I put the nose on Merrill, and I crossed the line. Friends, and I want to tell you what crossing it was like, because the answer's the whole horror of that country. It was like nothing. No bump, no chill, no static on the radio. Smooth air, white floor, engine drumming, an ordinary sky, friends. And that is what I would want you to carry out of this account if you carry one thing only. It does not announce itself. The old men never said you will feel it, friends. They only said it is occupied. 11 minutes in, near the middle of the square, the floor of the world opened. A hole in the overcast. Friends, the flyers call it a sucker hole, half a mile across, punched clean through the deck like a well, with the low sun slanting into it sideways. And I looked down into it, the way you look down a well, and the bottom of the well was green. Not white, friends, not November brown. Green. A valley in full summer color, in the second week of a November that had already buried the state twice. Green meadow benches stepping down to a lake of green bottle glass. Dead calm, holding the low sun on its face like a coin. And along the south shore of that lake, in the 40 seconds my track held the hole open under me, I saw what I told you. I saw in the first minute of this account, friends, and I will now finish the inventory I began there, because I owe the record every rivet of it. Better than 30 aircraft, drawn up in one rank, noses to the water, spaced even as pickets. I saw fabric wings the honey color of old varnish. I saw a high, square-shouldered thing with 3 engines that had no business existing outside a museum, friends, and it did not look like a museum's. It looked flown. It looked kept. I saw a yellow cub, bright as a toy, and I have wondered every night for 54 years, friends, every night, whether it was a super cub, and whether its tail number, could I have read it, would have matched a federal recovery report from June of 1969. I saw sun on clean glass down the whole rank, 30 windshields catching the light in sequence as I passed, like a row of watch faces, friends, like the valley was checking the time, and I saw the gap. Last place in the line, nearest the water, 1 aircraft's width of empty kept gravel, raked looking, ready looking, and I am a pilot. Friends, spacing and span are my mother tongue, and the gap was not cub-sized, and it was not beaver-sized. It was the width of a twin, friends. It was 310 sized, and the search for a Cessna 310 was in its 31st day, and the hole in the cloud slid behind my wing, and the white lid was back, and I flew the remaining 9 minutes to the far line of Lima Nine, with my hands doing the flying, friends, because the rest of me was down in that valley, walking the rank of them, reading tail numbers, counting, and my observer, friends, my half-asleep hired observer, with his face against the cold window the whole time. I said to him, casual as I could manufacture, "Did you see that hole in the deck back there?" And he stirred and said, "What hole?" and looked out at the white floor and yawned. Friends? And to this day I do not know, and it keeps me from sleep more than the valley does, whether that man missed 40 seconds of a hole half a mile wide from the other window of a small airplane, or whether the hole, friends, was only ever open on my side. I landed at Merrill at 3:45 with 21 minutes of fuel in the tanks, and I did the right thing, friends. I want that on my stone the way Axe got his. Whatever else this account says of me, that evening I did the creed. 2 women in wool coats were waiting on word of 4 men, and I had seen a parking space the exact width of their airplane. And so I walked across the ramp to the Civil Air Patrol trailer, and I sat down across a desk from a major of the United States Air Force, and I reported it, friends, all of it. The hole in the deck, the Green Valley in November, the lake, the rank of aircraft, 30+ types and colors, the Trimotor, the Yellow Cub, and the Gap. I gave him my track, my times, my altitudes, the position of the hole as near as dead reckoning could fix it, center of Lima 9, plus or minus 3 miles. And I will say this for that major, friends, he wrote it down. Every word, longhand on a sortie debrief form, no eyebrow, no smirk. And when I finished, he read it back to me, and he said, "This is going up tonight with a recommendation for a first light photo run." And he shook my hand, friends, and thanked me. And he drove home to my wife and slept 4 hours and was back on the ramp at 6. And there was no photo run at first light, friends. There was no photo run at any light. There was, instead, at 9 in the morning, the same major, finding me at the coffee urn with my name gone strange in his mouth, asking would I step back into the trailer, and in the trailer asking me, friends, with a fresh blank debrief form squared on the desk between us, to tell him again, from the beginning, what I had observed on yesterday's sortie. And I said, "You have it, Major. You wrote it last night and read it back to me." And that man looked at me, friends, and I have spent 54 years reading and rereading the look, and it was not mockery, and it was not confusion. It was procedure, friends. It was a man performing a step, and he said, "I have no record of a debrief from you yesterday, pilot." And the form was blank, and the form from the night before was nowhere on this earth. And I told it all again, slower, angrier, and he wrote it all again, longhand, and thanked me again. And that second report, friends, I watched him carry it into the back room of the trailer with my own eyes. And you already know, because you have sat at this lamp before. No photo run, no mention. And when the search stood down 9 days later, and I asked, through channels, a friend of a friend in Anchorage, to pull my 2 debriefs from the Lima 9 sorties of November 14th, the answer that came back, friends, unofficial, on a phone that clicked twice while we talked, was that there were no Lima 9 sorties on November 14th. The square had not been flown that day, the log said. The log, friends. I have 21 minutes of fuel in my tanks that say otherwise, and a hired observer who yawned, and 54 years, and nothing else at all. And 9 days after the search stood down, friends, the account acquired its federal chapter, and I want to report it exactly, because it was not what the movies would sell you, and the truth of it is stranger goods. 2 men came to my hangar on a gray afternoon, civilian coats, government shoes, and credentials I was allowed to look at but not hold. And they did not confiscate one thing. Friends, hear that. They did not ask for film. They did not mention debriefs, mine or anyone's. They stood in my open hangar door, making small talk about weather and freight rates like a pair of insurance men. And then the older one, looking not at me, but at my airplane. Friends, at the belly of my airplane, where the camera port was, said, "We understand you had a long sortie on the 14th, mostly over cloud." And I said, "Mostly, yes." And he said, "Solid deck, was it? And here it is. Friends, here is the whole visit." The sentence they drove out from Anchorage to hand me. He said, "In our experience, pilot, a solid deck is the best thing there is. A man sees odd light through holes in a deck. Tired man, low sun, 30 days of grief in the seat with him. No fault in him for what he thinks he saw. No sense in him repeating it." And he looked at me then. Friends, and there was no threat in that look. I want this understood. There was something worse. There was agreement. The look of one man to another across a fence they both know the height of. A look that said, "You know, and we know, and we both know what knowing is worth." And then they thanked me for my volunteer service. Friends, sincerely, I believe, and got in their gray car. And the older one, with his hand on the door, said the last of it. And I have never decided if it was a kindness or a filing procedure. He said, "That square flies better around than through. Your friend Brune has the right idea. Give him our regards." Friends, I had told no living soul that Axe Brune taught me the custom. They had never met him. To my knowledge, he was never interviewed. And they sent him, by name, their regards. Whoever they were, friends, they were not investigating Lima Nine. They were maintaining it. The way you maintain a fence. From the outside, on a schedule, without ever needing to discuss what the fence is for. The film is the shortest chapter, and the coldest, friends, so I will keep it short and cold. There was a camera aboard my airplane that day. A good one, the club's. A big negative outfit we used for spotting runs, mounted in the belly, and it had been clicking on an intervalometer. My whole route home, friends, 1 frame every 15 seconds. That was the drill, and I had forgotten it entire until the club's film came back from the Anchorage lab the following week. Developed as always in one batch. 50-some frames from my sortie, friends. White cloud floor, peaks like teeth. White floor, all sharp, all perfect. The lab man ran a clean shop. And 3 frames in the middle of the strip. The 3 frames whose times, when I did the arithmetic against my log, friends and I did it 4 times at the kitchen table with my wife asleep and the house ticking. Bracketed 2 in the afternoon plus 11 minutes. Fogged, friends. Not blank, not black. Fogged. White on white. Exposed to something the emulsion could not hold. And here is the sentence I need you to carry to the end of the account. The fog on those 3 frames had an edge. Friends. A curved edge, clean as a dinner plate, out at the rim of each frame, and inside the curve, ruined light, and outside it, the honest gray of an ordinary overcast. And I sat with a loop over the 3rd frame until 2 in the morning, friends, because at the very rim, outside the curve, in the last honest 1/8 of an inch of picture, you can see the cloud deck and the hole in it. The hole is in the photograph, friends. The well in the white floor. Right where I said it was. Right when I said it was. Proof. Hard silver proof that the hole existed, and everything the hole was showing. Everything down the well, every wing and windshield and green acre of it. burned out of the film in a perfect circle, like a face rubbed from a school photograph. Friends, by a thumb that knew exactly which face it was after. I never gave those frames to the patrol. You may judge me for it, friends. I judged myself for years. But 2 reports of mine had already ceased to exist inside 1 week, and a man learns the drill. And those 3 frames went where this account has lived ever since, in a bank box in Anchorage. And they are in this room with me tonight, friends. In the drawer of this table my lamp is sitting on, and when I am done talking, they go back in the envelope, and my daughter gets the key and a letter, and the letter says, what I will say to you now, plainly, since the government of the United States has spent 54 years declining to write it down. I saw the collection. The camera saw the whole. And something, friends, between the lab and the log and the locked back room of a trailer at Merrill Field, something with a thumb went through the record behind me, rubbing, and it missed 1/8 of an inch. The years, friends, and then the finish. And I will fly this last leg the way Axe taught me to fly all last legs, straight and level and honest about the fuel. The Great Search stood down at the end of November, 1972, 39 days, and the law of the land changed. Because of it, friends, that part is history you can check. Every airplane in America carries an emergency locator beacon today, because those 4 men never got found. And I think about that often. An entire sky of beacons, friends, born out of one silence. The families got a memorial and no graves. The grid came down off the hangar wall, and the bush went back to work, and I went back to work in it. And for 30 more years, friends, I hauled the freight and the hunters and the grief, and I flew around Lima Nine. Around, friends. Every route, every season, 40 extra minutes in fuel 100 times over, an old man's tithe. And I never begrudged it, and I never spoke of why, because that is the other half of the custom the old men handed me, the half I did not tell you yet. You do not talk about the square where the square can hear you, friends, and the square can hear you anywhere the aviation band reaches. That is what Axe believed, at any rate. Never say the numbers on the radio, he told me, late. The one other time we ever spoke of it. Position reports go around it same as airplanes. It knows its name in every alphabet, son. Do not call it. And I kept that too, friends, for 54 years, and it is why, even tonight, even this far downstream of caring what happens to me, I have told you the letter and the number of a square that no longer exists on any current chart, but not the mountains it sat among, not the river, not the nearest strip. This lamp reaches further than the aviation band, friends. I do not know what listens along it. I am not going to teach it my knock, as a friend of this house once put it. The old accounts keep each other's rules. And the world grew eyes while I grew old, friends, and I owe you the satellite chapter, because it is the only part of this account with a witness younger than 70. In the 1990s, a friend of my son's, a sharp kid out of Anchorage, took work at one of the outfits that processes satellite imagery, mapping, timber, oil leases. The whole state photographed from orbit over and over, and at a Christmas party, with a drink in me, I asked him, idle as I could make it, whether the coverage was truly wall-to-wall these days, or whether some squares still came up short. And that kid looked at me, friends, the way a man looks when a stranger steps on the exact stone he has been standing on. And he took me out to the porch in the cold, and he said, funny you would ask that. There is a block in the South Central Ranges, he said, one cell of the grid, that I have pulled every clean pass we own for, 11 years of passes, friends, different satellites, different seasons, different times of day. Cloud. Every single pass. Cloud, he said. And not weather cloud. Mr. Sivertson, I process weather all day. Weather moves. Weather has edges that match the passes around it. This is 1 cell wide, he said. And the cells beside it will be clear to the horizon. And that 1 cell is under a round white lid, pass after pass, year after year, like a coin laid on the map. And I flagged it once in a quality report, friends, the kid said. And the flag came back removed. No comment. And my supervisor took me to lunch, which he had never done, and talked about my future, which he had never mentioned. And I do not flag it anymore. And he looked at me on that porch, friends, 30 years old, sober as church by then. And he said, "You flew all your life. What is under it?" And I told him the only true thing, and the only safe thing, friends, both at once. I said, "Son, under that cloud, there is a valley that flies better around than through." And he nodded. And we went back inside to the party. And he processes his imagery to this day, friends. And the coin is still on the map. And now, there is one more soul in Anchorage, who knows which square of his own country he is not supposed to look at, and lies awake some nights, I would guess, same as me, listening to the enormous patience of it. Axe Brune flew until they took his medical at 77 and died at 88. My age, friends. The arithmetic is not lost on me. And at his funeral in Homer, with half the old bush world standing around in bolo ties, his widow, a tiny, fierce woman named Sigrid, took my arm and steered me to the kitchen and told me the thing I flew home unable to see the instruments for. "He left instructions, Orrin," she said. "Cremation, and the ashes to go up in an airplane, which, friends, is ordinary as rain among us. Half the old pilots are scattered off some favorite ridge." And I asked which ridge he wanted. And Sigrid Brune looked at me steady, the way the wives of those men learn to look. And she said, "That is why I am telling you in the kitchen." He wrote it down for me 20 years ago and made me swear it. He wants to go over the square, Orrin. You know the one. "Dead center," he wrote. "Noon on a clear day, so they see me coming." And I said, "They, Sigrid." And she folded her hands, friends, and said, "I am reading you the man's words. So they see me coming, and know I flew it fair my whole life, and turned at every edge they ever asked. Tell Orrin he's the only one left I trust to hold the course." And friends, on a hard blue noon the following June, I flew Askell Brune into Lima 9, dead center, straight and level, his ashes going out the vent window in a long gray banner. And the overcast was 10 miles off that day. No lid, no hole, just the mountains and the meadows green below. And I looked down. Friends, of course I looked down. I owed him that. No lake, no rank of wings. A valley among valleys, grass and rock and water, going about its geology. And I want to be truthful with you, to the last. That is all I saw. But my engine, friends, a motor I had maintained with my own hands for 11 years, that had never missed a beat in its life. My engine, as the last of Axe went out the window, gave one single deep, even stroke, unlike all its others. One, like a drum, struck once at a graveside, and ran on perfect. And I have had mechanics laugh at me. And I have had one old Athabascan freight pilot not laugh at me, friends. And I hold with him. Something received. That is the word I have settled on. Something received him. With honors. The way a good port receives a good captain. And I flew home over the edge of that square for the last time in my life, with the vent window whistling, and my face wet. Friends, and I do not fully know, to this hour, whether what I felt was grief, Some of it was envy. Friends, there 54 years of secrets, you may as well have them all. So here is your rule, friends, from the last man of the coffee urn. And it is a pilot's rule, but you can walk it as easy as fly it. Every country has its Lima Nine. Every map you will ever own has a square nobody's road crosses. And mostly, friends, 99 and 100, it is just land, steep or wet or poor, empty the way a pocket is empty. But if you ever notice, friends, and you will know it when you notice, that the old ones of any trade, the least superstitious people you know, the surveyors, the linemen, the pilots, the guides, all go around one particular piece of the world without ever once agreeing out loud to do it, then you go around it too. You can look in from the edge, friends. Looking in from the edge is free. It has always been free. The edge is where the accounts come from. But you do not take your shadow inside the line. You do not say its name where the wires or the waves can carry. And if ever you look down into a hole in the world and see, in a place no keeping should be, a thing kept, friends, a lamp lit, a bed made, a rank of bright machines with one space open, you look once to be able to tell it true, and then you put your eyes back on your own horizon and you go home, because the space, friends, whatever size it is, the space is not measured for your machine. It is measured for you. Put your town in the comments tonight for an old pilot, and the empty square nearest it. No coordinates. Friends, learn from me, just what the old folks call it. I keep the chart. It has more squares on it than you would sleep well knowing. Thank you for riding the last leg with me. Check your fuel, mind your edges, and leave a light on, friends, a ground light, the kind that says this one is home and accounted for. Good night.